There have been such maritime accidents in the past that have surpassed human capability to fathom the consequence of an untoward disaster. The causes of each accident could have been different, and the reasons could have been many, but the aftermaths have always been drastic and horrifying. The Kursk disaster is slotted on top of a huge list of such catastrophes. The importance and the need to understand the Kursk submarine disaster is not just because of the mishap that occurred, but also because of the very nature of the naval vessel and the theories that followed its sinking in the Barents Sea. The Kursk was not just any Russian submarine, fast, stealthy, and technologically complex. The Kursk was the pride of the cash-starved post-Soviet sea force. Today's rusting Russian Navy is a shadow of its former glory, when the Soviet Union was a true superpower. Submarine Kursk was a nuclear submarine, and from the dwindling Russian military point of view, its relevance to asserting Russia's dominance in terms of nuclear power was enormous. However, what was supposed to be a routine Russian naval exercise turned out to be the worst nightmare for the highly sophisticated Russian submarine. On the morning of August 12, 2000, Kursk was in the Barents Sea, participating in the Summer X exercise, the first large-scale naval exercise planned by the Russian Navy in more than a decade, and also its first since the fall of the Soviet Union. It consisted of 30 ships and 3 submarines. Kursk had recently won a citation for its excellent performance and been recognized as having the best submarine crew in the Northern Fleet. Although this was an exercise, it was one of the few submarines authorized to carry a full combat weapons load at all times. Kursk was a Project 949A class anti-submarine of the Oscar class, known as the Oscar II by its NATO reporting name, and was the penultimate submarine of the Oscar II class designed and approved in the Soviet Union. Construction began in 1990 at the Soviet Navy military shipyards in Severodvinsk, Russia. During the construction of Kursk, the Soviet Union collapsed. Work continued, and she became one of the first naval vessels completed after the collapse. The Russian submarine K-141 took its name in 1993 from the city of Kursk, where the Battle of Kursk was fought. This battle, which took place in 1943, is regarded as the biggest warfare in the Army combat tanks. Kursk's Russian name is Atomnaya Podvodnaya Lodka Kursk, meaning atomic-powered submarine Kursk. Kursk was an Oscar II-class nuclear-powered cruise missile submarine of the Russian Navy. Kursk was inherited by Russia and launched in 1994, before being commissioned by the Russian Navy on December 30th, as part of the Russian Northern Fleet, which had suffered funding cutbacks throughout the 1990s. Many of its submarines were anchored and rusting in Zapadnaya Litsa Naval Base, 100 kilometers from Murmansk. Zapadnaya Litsa is a naval base of the Russian Navy, part of the Russian Northern Fleet, located in Murmansk Oblast, Russia. Little work to maintain all but the most essential frontline equipment, including search and rescue equipment, had occurred. Kursk had a mythical standing. It was reputedly unsinkable and submarine of 2X OK-650B pressurized water nuclear reactors delivering 120,700 shaft horsepower, in turn powering 2X steam turbines, with these delivering 49,600 horsepower each to 2X shafts, these fitted with 2x7 bladed propellers. The large boat was slow when diving and unhurried to maneuver, but they had a submerged speed of about 30 knots, which proved sufficient in keeping pace with the American carrier task force. It was claimed could withstand a direct hit from a torpedo. The outer hull was constructed using 0.3 inches steel plate covered by up to 3 inches of rubber, which minimized other submarines or surface vessels' ability to detect the submarine. The inner pressure hull was made of high quality of 2-inch steel plates. The two hulls were separated by a 3 to 7 feet gap. The inner hull was divided into 9 watertight compartments. The boat was 508 feet, about as long as 2 jumbo jets. The anti-design represented the highest achievement of Soviet nuclear submarine technology. They are the second largest cruise missile submarines ever built. It was built to defeat an entire United States aircraft carrier group. A single Type 65 kit torpedo carried a 450 kilograms warhead powerful enough to sink an aircraft carrier. Both missiles and torpedoes could be equipped with nuclear warheads. She was 30 feet longer than the preceding Oscar I class of submarines. The senior officers had individual staterooms, and the entire crew had access to a gymnasium. She was designed to remain submerged for up to 120 days. The sail superstructure was reinforced to allow it to break through the Arctic ice. The length of Kursk was 154 meter, height 9 meter, and beam was 18.2 meter. The submarine was armed with 24 SSN-19 P700 Granite cruise missiles and 8 torpedo tubes in the bow, 421 inches and 426 inches. The Granite missiles, with a range of 550 kilometers, were capable of supersonic flight at altitudes over 20 kilometers. They were designed to swarm enemy vessels and intelligently choose individual targets, which terminated with a dive onto the target. The torpedo tubes could be used to launch either torpedoes or anti-ship missiles with a range of 50 kilometers. Her weapons included 18 SSN-16 Stallion anti-submarine missiles. The Type 65 kit is a torpedo manufactured in the Soviet Union, now Russia. It was developed for use against U.S. Navy aircraft carrier battle groups, as well as large merchant targets such as supertankers and advanced enemy submarines. At 8:51 a.m. local time, Kursk requested permission to conduct a torpedo training launch and received a response in Russian language. Dobro means good. After considerable delay, the submarine was set to fire 2 dummy torpedoes at the Kirov-class battlecruiser Pyotr Veliky. At 11:29 a.m. local time, the torpedo room crew loaded the first practice Type 65 kit torpedo, without a warhead, into Kursk's No. 4 torpedo tube on the starboard side. It was 35 feet long and weighed 5 tons. The crew loaded a dummy Type 65 kit torpedo. A faulty weld in its casing leaked high-test peroxide HTP inside the torpedo tube, initiating a catalytic explosion. The explosion blew off both the inner and outer tube doors, ignited a fire, destroyed the bulkhead between the first and second compartments, damaged the control room in the second compartment, and killed the torpedo and control room crew. The explosions that doomed the Kursk were most likely caused by the use of hydrogen peroxide as a torpedo propellant, a chemical so volatile that Britain's Royal Navy banned its use decades earlier. Probably gas turbine powered by hydrogen peroxide, kerosene and compressed air fuel driving contra-rotating propellers. The explosions in the forward torpedo room killed almost all the crew instantly, but 23 sailors found refuge in the very last compartment, readiness to fire HTP torpedoes. Kursk's crew had no experience with HTP-powered torpedoes and had not been trained in handling or firing HTP-powered torpedoes. Due to their inexperience and lack of training, compounded by incomplete inspections and oversight, and because the Kursk's crew followed faulty instructions when loading the practice torpedo. Norwegian seismic array readings at 3 locations of the explosions on the submarine Kursk on August 12, 2000. At 11:29 a.m. seismic detectors at the Norwegian seismic array and in other locations around the world recorded a seismic event of magnitude 1.5 on the Richter scale. The location was fixed at northeast of Murmansk, approximately 250 kilometers from Norway and 80 kilometers from the Kola Peninsula. At 11:31 a.m. 2 minutes and 14 seconds after the first, a second event, measuring 4.2 on the Richter scale, or 250 times larger than the first, was registered on seismographs across northern Europe and was detected as far away as Alaska. The second explosion was equivalent to 2 to 3 tons of TNT. The seismic data showed that the explosion occurred at the same depth as the seabed. The seismic event showed that the submarine had moved about 1,300 feet from the site of the initial explosion. It was enough time for the submarine to sink to a depth of 354 feet and remain on the sea floor for a short period. The tragedy also triggered a serious overhaul of the Russian Navy's emergency rescue service. At that time, the country lacked any capabilities to rescue the crew at such a depth and finally had to request international assistance. It was 9 days after the disaster that Norwegian divers managed to open the submarine's airlock to see all the seamen dead. Only 23 crew members managed to make it to a small compartment where they stayed alive for about 6 hours. The remaining crew were killed when they tried to replace a chemical oxygen cartridge, which fell into the oily sea water and exploded. The explosion killed several of the men. The rest died of suffocation when the ensuing fire consumed what oxygen was left. However, the batteries of the Russian mini-sub sent to save them didn't run long enough for sustained rescue operations. With time running out, Russian military leaders kept a tight lid of secrecy over the incident and only accepted foreign help days later. The officially recognized cause of the tragedy was a torpedo explosion. The torpedo manufacturer challenged this hypothesis, insisting that its design would prevent the kind of event described. A retired Russian admiral, who was the commander of Russia's northern fleet when the Kursk exploded and sank during naval maneuvers in the Barents Sea, alleged that the Kursk submarine disaster was caused by a collision with a NATO submarine bumped into the Kursk while shadowing it at close distance. Western submarine was also damaged in the powerful explosion and sent a distress signal from the area. Russian media reports claimed that 2 U.S. submarines and a British sub were spotted in the area near the Russian naval exercise in the Barents Sea when the Kursk disaster happened. The government's handling of the rescue effort shook the nation and dented President Vladimir Putin's prestige. 2 years after the disaster, a summary of the government's top-secret investigation was released. In this summary, it was revealed that stunning breaches of discipline, shoddy, obsolete, and poorly maintained equipment was the cause, along with negligence, incompetence, and mismanagement. No justification was found for the delay in rescue missions, and the Russian Navy was concluded to have been completely unprepared. The country and world responded with an outpouring of sympathy. The Moscow Times received many letters of condolence to the families and friends of the crew members, and indeed to the entire country. The Kursk's wreckage was lifted in October 2001, allowing the investigators to retrieve 115 bodies and search the mangled hull for clues about the cause.